If you love pigeons, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the All About Pigeons Podcast, the world's only podcast dedicated to every aspect of the pigeon hobby. I'm your host, Phillip Fry, and every episode is listener requested, ad-free, and created for pigeon enthusiasts from around the world. Whether you're flying homers, showing pigeons, flying performance breeds, keeping pigeons as pets, or just getting started in the hobby, we're here to learn, share, and celebrate pigeons together, connecting pigeon fanciers across countries, cultures, and generations. This is the All About Pigeons Podcast. Today we're going to be talking all about the Almond gene and genetics and the legacy of Dr. Hollander also. And with that, we have Kenny Pomona. So Kenny, thanks so much for coming on and talking with us today.
Yeah, no problem.
So you're pretty well known in your area, and if they know, they know. But can you give us a little background on how pigeons came into your life?
Yeah, there was half a dozen of us 10-year-old boys sitting in my across the street neighbor's garage, and his 16-year-old uncle was there with them, and they were talking about the pigeon loft that they had at Steve's grandmother's house, which would be his uncle's mom's house. And they were talking about putting one together in the back of Steve's yard. But the uncle didn't really know anywhere in our area that there might be pigeons. And just as he said that, Steve's stepdad came through and he said, "You want to see pigeons? They got pigeons where I buy my dog food. I'll take you down there tomorrow." So we had a little trip down to a place called Pomona Feed. And out front, they had roll-out pens with pigeons, different breeds, different colors, all different. And we had an old dog run in the backyard of the house that we lived in, and there was an old plywood doghouse there. And I was just enthralled when I saw these birds. Now, I've been an animal person all my life, which is probably the most common thread with all us pigeon people. So I started out with teddy bear hamsters, and then I went to breeding mice colonies. I had rosy boas and pythons and South American green iguanas and all that kind of stuff. So I had that stuff going on when I saw these pigeons and thought, hey, I'd like to try this. And I ran it past my parents, and my mom says, well, you got to get rid of that other stuff. If you want pigeons, you can't have everything. So I did. And I turned that doghouse into a so-called pigeon loft, put some orange crates up in the back, and made a little poultry wire door to go over the doghouse opening, the door opening, and promptly went down and got a pair of West of England tumblers. They were the old, short, small, cobby flying type, and was a recessive red model and a black model. So you can see already I like color contrast. One of my hamsters, they were the teddy bear, they were the white belted, and the mice, I liked all the piebalds and all that. I like color contrast. And that started me on a lifelong journey with pigeons.
That's interesting. So, right off the bat, you're interested in the colors too. That's
right
really
off the
cool.
bat, as soon as I saw them, it was love. It was infection. It was awesome wonder. And I had to have a pair.
So West of England's was your first breed. What was the journey like, kind of going through different breeds, and what were some of the
breeds? I flew my West. I flew those birds, and mostly it was that red mottle cockbird out because the hen was usually on eggs, and I would turn him out in the morning, and she had nowhere to go. I didn't know anything about, hey, leave the cockbird in, from 10 to 4 and all that. And it was usually watching him fly. And he did perform. He, twizzles and plate spins and all that stuff. And then I met a classmate in 7th grade typing class. And this person was the teacher's assistant sat up there next to the teacher and showed everybody how to type because they knew how to type better than everybody else. And her father had pencil rulers. And I've been reading now. I've been to the library and been through Wendell Levi's book, The Pigeon, and found not Pigeon Debut, but American Pigeon Journal, and been reading all about pencil rulers, pencil. So I made my way over to her house to introduce myself to her dad. Fell in love with pencil rulers. Pretty soon, I was cleaning his pens, feeding and watering his birds, anything to be near him. And he started giving me youngsters that I started to fly. So I had some Western tumblers, and now I had a few pair of rulers. Pretty soon, he took me to a pigeon show at the Pomona Valley Fairgrounds. That was the pageant, and that's where I saw almonds, and that was it. That was like, I gotta have those.
Yeah. Do you remember what breed you saw those almonds in?
I saw them in any breed I saw. I saw them in
Oh,
fantails. I saw them in rollers. I saw them in parlor rollers. I think that's what sticks in my mind is the Birminghams, Bill Duncan, Sam Liskey, George Gulla, the fantails, Denisaurus, the parlor rollers, Denisaurus. And there may have been some other breeds. They don't stand out at this point, but I wanted some of those rollers really bad. And if I wanted bad enough, guess what happens? I got all my rollers.
Yep. Find a way. So what was it for you? Is it the variety, the pattern? Like what is it? And why do
Yeah,
you think
it's
most
like I
people are
said.
really drawn?
Yeah, it's the color contrast. It's just the dark against juxtaposed against that beautiful orange, burnt orange ground color. You got to look back at who I am. I like calico cats. I like Appaloosa and paint horses. I like koi fish. I mean, there's a pattern there. I like the striking different color fields against one another, truncating throughout the animal. And man, almonds had that, I'll tell you.
So with all your years of experience, playing with the almond gene and coming up with different things, you've obviously been able to understand it and work on it, create it. So let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit. What are some things that you can kind of tell us about that trait that would help people who are breeding with the almond gene and are trying to make better almond pigeons?
Well, okay, people that are breeding almonds and want to make better ones, the kite makes the almond. Okay, almond is not a gene. Almond is a color. Stipper is one of the main components, but an almond is stipper added to a classic kite. Okay, what is a classic kite? It's tumbler kite bronze, which is the kite bronze that you see in English short-faced tumblers, other tumbler breeds from Europe and the Middle East that have that same type of what Doc called tumbler kite bronze. They're over T patterns. Almond does its best work on the most non-spread, closed up, filled in pattern that it can get. So T patterns, we even say you want a velvet T pattern. That's a T pattern where you can almost not even see the little tiny blue T at the tip of the feather. The bronze is enhanced by a single dose of recessive red. Recessive red is a red. Bronze is a admixture of red and black. And there's this whole family of bronzes: Lebanon bronze, Brander bronze, kite bronze, toy stencil bronze, ruler bronze, tumbler bronze, and I'm talking English short-faced tumblers with that single dose of recessive red and addition of dirty, okay, capital V, that fills in that pigment field that Stipper's going to operate on to a T. They're made to be with one another, and that's why you see throughout the literature back to the 1700s. Oh, an almond to a kite, almond to a kite, almond to a kite. Well, I mean, and that's what they said, almond to a kite. We're going to correct that, and we're going to say stipper to a kite. Now, so they say, okay, well, what's a stipper? Well, all almonds are stippers, but not all stippers are almonds. So you can take a beautiful classic almond and pair it to a blue bar, pair it to a ash red dominant opal. You can pair it to anything. It's going to make you speckled, uh, broke, flecked individuals. They're just stippers. They're not almond. An almond is a certain color with a certain pigment pattern in the tail and in the flights, over the rump, through the hackles, and over the main part of the body. Different in different areas. So if you've got a nice colored almond, or you could have what the Europeans call them multicolored. They look like an almond, but they don't have the proper amount of almost white in the flights. The tail band does not have, the terminal tail band. It should be white in an almond. And then it has sprinkles of black of the darker color and some of the almond ground color, the lighter yellow stuff. And I have pictures. I got 11,000 images on this phone, and I can post some on your site too if people want to see what I'm talking about. They want to know what they should be looking at. If you get an almond that doesn't have that, that's not really an almond. If you were to show it, it'd be disqualified because there is a actual standard for what the tail color should be, what the flight should be, what the rump should be, the back, all of it. They're all broken out. The best, and they're written in many of the old books. I'm talking from 1800s, even 1765 in the treatise of 1765. There's a description. The best written description I've seen is in C.A. House's Tumblers and All About Them, and it talks, the terminal tail bar should be an inch, and it should be white all the way across, and with a sprinkling. And the sub-terminal tail bar, which is that little bitty strip at the end of the terminal tail bar, should be almond ground color. Huh. From the root of the tail bar coming back towards the rump should be almond ground color. And so I've got pictures, multitudes. I mean, if anybody wants to see them, I can post them on your site. That's what I would say is they don't bring over the proper kite. It's not just a bronze. It's not just to go find a pigeon that's got showing some bronze. That's a start. If you don't have anything else, that's a start. But they don't bring over the right bronze. If you were going to breed an almond and you only had an almond, cock or hen, I would search around in that breed. And I'd start with the person that you got the bird from, if you got it from a person, and say, hey, where can I find a kite like of this breed, That's really the main thing that someone new starting out with doesn't understand. It's the kite underneath stipper that makes that almond.
Would it make a difference as far as if you could pick or choose which bird was the cockbird and which bird was the hen for?
Well, the only difference it would make is that stipper is a sex-linked, so it's on the Z chromosome. It's a sex-linked dominant. Okay, so a classic almond cockbird is heterozygous stipper. He's got ST on the one Z chromosome, and on the homologous one, he's got wild type. Just crop. That's wild type. That's it. The hen, she's hemizygous. So on her one sex chromosome, the Z, she's got stipper. And the other thing's just a little tiny inert piece up there, So she is what she is, what you see. She's going to make you all sons that are going to have stipper. The cockbird can make both. He can make daughters. He can make sons, because when you have uh, meiosis and the gametic reduction, it's throwing dice each time. He's throwing two chromosomes. What's going to mix up with that hen? Is it going to mix up with a little tiny inert piece, or, you know, so you can get both. You can get cocks or hens. Uh, Almond Mama, she's going to make all sons that are stipper, or if they're proper almond.
So the stipper is the sex-linked chromosome.
Yep. So it's a sex-linked dominant gene.
Interesting. So let's talk about your time with Dr. Willard Hollander and how you first came in contact and got to know him.
So I don't know if you've had him for any of your podcasts, and if you haven't, shame on you.
I know. Yeah.
I'm talking about the geneticist par excellence, Frank Mosca, who is a very good friend of mine and a very well-spoken, learned pigeon geneticist in his own right. Mm-hmm. And I was getting a little bit of notice in the shows, bringing my almond rollers. Of course, they always get tossed out because if they're colored, they're no good and all that. But I was starting to get some recognition because I was bringing you look at them and you draw jobs and you slobber like you got a basketball shoe in your mouth and the strings are hanging out. That's the kind of stuff I was bringing. Yeah. And it was turning some heads. And then, so Frank and I would do some things, he had some almond stipper in some of his racing homers, and he had one that was beautiful, was reduced heterozygous stipper on blue. It was a beautiful bird. I think he flew it out to 500 or 600 miles. We were doing a lot of stuff together. He used to live just down the block from me, and he said, why don't you write Dr. Hollander? Write Dr. Hollander. Now, as a kid, I'm reading The Pigeon by Levi, and I see Hollander's forward, and everything in there is Hollander did this, Hollander did that. And I'm thinking he's like Jesus Christ, like he's dead, and he's holier than thou. What do you mean, write to Dr. Hollander? Yeah, he's alive. I write to him all the time. Okay. He gave me the address. I wrote to him. He writes back and sends me a manila folder that's probably 3/4 of an inch thick with all kinds of his reports and stuff he did on mosaics, and all kinds of genetic reports, and a letter. Well, Frank Mosca said you were going to write me, but I know hardly anything about you. What kind of books do you have? He just right into it. And that was my introduction to Doc. And a few letters in, I asked Frank if he had his phone number. And Frank said, well, yeah, I got it. I'll give it to you, but doesn't really like to talk on the phone. He says he thinks better on paper. But obviously, you've met me now, and you can tell I don't care. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I call him. Dude, we're on the phone for an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. I'm talking successive calls, just like he wouldn't let me get off the phone. For somebody that didn't like to talk on the phone, well, he didn't want to let me off the phone. And I would take notes. I would write down on a yellow pad, phone call to Doc, the date and the time. And I'd be taking notes and scribbles and stuff like that. So that was my introduction to Doc. And he made me feel like I was his kid. He made me feel like I was his son, say grandson if you want. But that connection was that organic and that raw and that real. And I thought it was special to me, but I come to find out that a whole lot of us out there that are Docites, that he made feel that way. He concentrated on you. When he was writing you or talking to you, or that's what, that was the deal. And I would tell people that it's like I'm family. It's like, I'm boasting, but everybody said the same thing. Everybody said the same thing. He met me where I was.
Yeah.
He would meet you where you are in whatever principle that you wanted to discuss with him. For me, it was Almond, which now we know is stipper. And if he thought and I got a bachelor's degree in animal science, animal production, uh, a minor in poultry science, and I took as many upper division genetics classes as I could. And so I had some of the lingo. I knew what he would, if he wanted to throw something at me. And so if he thought that you had something that you hadn't unleashed, he was looking at you, all right, kid, I'm taking you up 7 notches today. We're going to leapfrog, and I'm going to pound it into you until you realize that you leapfrog. Then we're going to leapfrog from there. And that's how he treated me and anybody else that I've talked to that had any kind of a genetic knowledge or sense. And you also have to understand that genetics has just come easy for me. It's just, I can read a paper. It's not hard. It's my language. Why? I don't know, but it just is. And he knew that. Intellectually, he's a brilliant man, very intelligent. He is a puzzle solver. He likes puzzles.
Oh, really?
In my life, yeah. In my very first time, I wrote him. I said, "Look, this was in like June of 1996, and we were going to go. Family's going to drive out to go see mom-in-law in Kansas City, Missouri." And so on the way, we were going to go to the Black Hills and tent camp. And I said, we looped right by Ames, Iowa. I'd like to go see Doc. She said, well, write him. So I wrote it. And yeah, he begged me off. You. Finally, my wife wrote it behind my back. And he said, okay, yeah, you bring him. And so she dropped me off there one day, and I was there for 12 hours at his house. I've been to his place 4 times in my life. And in that 12 hours, we had school. It was school all day. And he had puzzles everywhere, Sudoku and crossword puzzles. And genetics is a puzzle.
Yeah. Right.
He wanted to solve the puzzle. It just happened to be genetics puzzles was his language. It was his thing. And it was full immersion. And it was everywhere in his house. Every coffee table, every on his kitchen table, every end table, puzzles, 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 puzzles. He was a smart guy intellectually, but he knew how to meet you where you were and break it down for you to understand, for the masses.
So how do you think the breeders back then compared to today, how are they looking at the genetics and, creating almonds? Like, how is that different now?
Well, back then, they were all looking for linkages and to how to break a linkage, crossover percentages in order to gene map a chromosome. And he was forever looking for linkages. And if he found one, he made sure he got the stock, and then he'd go about trying to break it and see what kind of crossover rates he could get, what percentage. And that tells you how close or how far genes are that are located on the same chromosome. It doesn't work if different chromosomes, there's no linkage. But that's the way pretty much those genetics nuts, they call themselves, that's what they were working on. They try to, and you get a mutation. What did it mutate from? Read the mutation back to where it came from, try to find out if there was any kind of a genetic linkage basis, what happened. Nowadays, with Dr. Shapiro and the U of U and the other universities that are participating with him in Texas and in back east, it's DNA assays. It's copy number variants. We learned a whole lot about stipper. Now, they called it Almond in the paper. That was wrong. That really should have been peer reviewed, and we are the peers, us breeders that breed almond colored pigeons. But anyway, they took blood from feathers and they found copy number variants. And stipper has one of the highest copy number variants there are. Now, whiteout had the most. That's another allele, or fairly recent allele, if you want to say 20 years, of stipper. And it just causes a bird to stay white almost its whole life and gain very little flecking as it ages. But stipper had a huge amount of copy number variants, and then it went down as you went faded, Qualman, hickory. These had fewer copy number variants. So that 100% logically made sense to me and to others that you can get faded birds from almonds. You can get almond birds from almonds. You can get hickory birds from almonds. You can get chalky birds. But it doesn't go the other way around. They don't mutate up. The reason is it's easier to drop copy number than it is to gain. You see what I'm saying? Think of it as a stack of Lincoln logs, and you stack up a thing of Lincoln logs 18 inches high. Okay, that's stipper. That's got all these copy number variants. But then you pull 3 inches off the bottom. Well, now you got something different. Maybe you got faded. Then you pull 3 more inches off that. Now maybe you got hickory. You're losing genetic mass there. You're losing DNA mass. So that would probably fascinate him. And he said it many times in the conversations I had with him, face to face, on the phone, and even in my letters. I don't know, DNA is going to figure it out someday. DNA, he knew where it was going. He knew where it was going. Mm-hmm. And I think that he'd be pleased with the DNA assays and what they found out, but he'd find 100 more questions because, he was a professor of genetics at Iowa State University. He was a world-renowned mouse geneticist. And if a mouse geneticist knew that you knew Willard Hollander, they'd take you to lunch, get you cherry jubilee, whatever you like. They would fry your mind to find out everything you knew about Doc.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what do you think today when you're at shows and you're seeing the almonds that are there? What kind of mistakes do you think is pretty common that people are making right now?
I think we touched on them already. Well, one is calling almond a gene, not a gene, the color. Not understanding how important kite is. Kite is the make or break of a classic almond. All that kite needs is the stipper. Lend me your stipper gene and I will make you an almond. What kind of kite is under there is going to dictate a lot about what you see. I think that's probably the best advice I can give you. Get a classic kite. Now, what's a classic kite? Well, tumbler kite bronze is dominant, but you'd prefer to have it homozygous. Now, it'll happen if it's heterozygous, but you'd prefer to have it homozygous. A classic kite is T pattern. You'd prefer for that to be homozygous. T pattern is dominant, so you can have it over T pattern and bar, but you'd prefer to have that homozygous. Dirty is a cruddy that fills in all those areas on the body of the bird where T pattern's affecting, and it's dominant. So if you just had one dose, it should do it, but you'd prefer to have it homozygous. One dose of recessive red. If you put 2 doses of recessive red, then you've got a recessive red kite. In other words, you've got a kite, but it looks recessive red. And you put stipper on that, you get a D-Roy. Okay, a D-Roy is technically a recessive red almond. That's what it is. So if you can maintain tumbler kite bronze, T pattern, dirty, and heterozygous recessive red, if you know that's what you got in your kite, quote unquote, and you get a good almond, a good stipper, even if it's something they call a multicolor because it doesn't have all the amount of white and flights and tail, but that stipper, and that could pop you a beautiful colored, properly colored almond pigeon.
And so unlike other breeds where, you got a certain color that you like, or, some really clean bars, you put those two together, you always hear about, you never pair two almonds together. And that goes
Well,
back to like what you
okay,
said.
so a lot of people say two almonds is together is a lethal gene. No, it's not a lethal gene. Those babies hatch. But what happens is stippers' main job is to restrict pigment production. You put two of that together, you get a white ground colored bird because you got double dose of restricting pigment. It's not letting any pigment through. That affects also the pigments in the eye. So you get columbola or fissure of the iris, which their pupils will be oblong, triangle shaped, football shaped. Now, this is an Elise case problem. Worst case is they'll be born or hatched bladder-eyed, blind. So traditionally, you stay away from doing that because you don't want to make something that's just going to waste away and die, or are you going to make something that you are going to have to cull? And when I use the word cull, C-U-L-L here, we know what we're talking about.
You talked about
I have made hundreds of homozygous almonds.
mm-hmm.
I have such a rich, filled in pigment in my family. I don't get bladder-eyed, pop-eyed blind babies. I get them. They've got a football eye, rectangle eye, and their vision is affected. You can see them searching like this when they're okay, but they eat, they drink, they breed, they make babies. But if you try to turn them out to fly, they're not going to do that. They can't. They can fly in the loft from here to there, that to that.
Yeah.
But they'd be lost if they got loose or you tried to fly them to roll them, or that's not the right thing. So I would say that it's something that a newbie would want to stay away from, because you got to realize if you make that offspring, that homozygous bird, and it has eye problems that are going to hinder it, you got to give it the best, good, safe home you can, or you got to cull it. And there's no two ways about that. So you should probably stay away from that.
Right. What are there any kind of Bible genetic books or specifically for working on almonds that you'd recommend?
Well, yeah, I mean, I have Levi's The Pigeon. Doc wrote that whole section on genetics by himself. He put together Levi's manuscript. He put together that whole book. He told me so.
Wow.
And Levi makes mention of it in his foreword. I have Doc's Origins and Excursions in Pigeon Genetics, which is now out of print, but I do believe his son Paul put it online, and there's a link to it somewhere. I just don't know exactly where. I have the Pigeon Breeder's Notebook by Joe Quinn. Got some mistakes. He included grizzle in the genetic makeup of of the almonds, and in fact, back in 2000, I think 99, 2000. So they had a revival of the American Pigeon Fanciers Council in Oklahoma City. And leading up to the first one, I had been chiding, I'd been writing Joe Quinn and writing Joe Quinn, and everybody said he doesn't write. He doesn't write back because he got inundated with letters when his genetic book came out. And I wrote him and I wrote him and I was sending him Doc's letters. Oh, he ain't gonna write you back. You know, you're wasting your time. And I sent him some of my. I used to write a column called Almond. That magazine you got up there was a column that I wrote for the debut from I think '97 to 2002. I sent him a couple of those, and by God, I get a thing something from him, a little card, and he says something about you've earned one chit, and there's a little postcard of Modena on the back. It says one chit, CHIT. Then I get a letter from him asking me to come and be a presenter at the first annual revival of the American Pigeon Fancier Council in Oklahoma City. What that was all about was the Pigeon Museum, to support that. But I went and I talked and I gave a paper on mistakes, and I wrote mistakes that Fulton made in his writing, and I wrote on a mistake that Doc and Carl Grafey did in Doc's book, and then I wrote on the Joe Quinn's mistake. And I handed out pictures of all kinds of quote unquote almonds. I'm talking classic almond, I'm talking classic ash red almond, classic brown almond, dilute almond, Andalusian almond. I mean, and I passed out feathers, and I passed out almond holes that had been broke open, and I let them molder. I let them get old, and I passed all that stuff out so everybody could hold it, see it, and touch it. And that night, up in a meeting area up above the restaurant there, Joe Quinn asked me to write a book with him on almond, but I turned him down. I was mid-30s and two young kids, and I didn't think I had the time. Bad mistake. I That's a regret. I should have done that. And I guess it hurt his feelings because later the next day, after the morning sessions of stuff, he came to me and said, you were right to turn me down about writing that book. You know why? I said, why? He said, because I would have got all the credit. Nobody would have given you any credit. But he told me that night when he asked me to write the book, he says, your work's far superior to mine. That was kind of nice to hear. There were a couple people there that heard that. It doesn't really matter. It's pigeons, but to hear that from him, that was looking back now at almost 63, that I should have wrote that book with him.
Yeah.
I messed up.
Well, I mean, yeah, you've done a lot of columns and stuff, and I mean, you definitely contributed a lot as well too. So, and you've come on the
Now,
podcast and you've shared as well here too. So, it's
you asked about practical takeaway or history and materials, and you asked about do I have any of the letters, notes, and
yeah,
I have every single one of them.
really.
I have
Oh,
a
that's cool.
file. I have a file, a Doc Hollander file that's 5 inches thick, and I have a copy of every letter I ever sent him, and I have every letter he ever sent back. I have
That's
every
awesome.
handout, flyer, report, everything that he's ever sent me. I have it all. I have a binder that I got from, it had been in Paul Bradford's hands, and then it was in Ed Bill's hands, Magna, Utah, and he gave it to me. He said Paul told him to hold on to it till they ever found somebody that was interested enough in genetics and knew enough that was worthy of it. And it was a binder of letters back and forth from 1948 through 50 something with Doc Hollander and the late Bill Evans, who was a tumbler breeder, long-faced clean lake tumbler breeder of Salt Lake City. 48. And there's letters in there to him from Carl Grafey, and I have stuff that I didn't have when Doc was alive. I've found other manuscripts that he wrote that I printed them off. So, I'm still, if I find something that has something that Doc wrote, I'll go find it. I'll get it. So I have everything, all of it.
That's awesome. Such a piece of history too. That's really neat to have all that. That's good that you
I
got
miss the
copies.
guy. I miss him so much.
Yeah.
It wasn't as much fun after he passed. I had several uh, genetic projects that were going on with the almonds, with the stippers that he was kind of overseeing, and the feed store that I now own, where I bought my first pair of pigeons. I started working there when I was an 18-year-old kid in '82, and then my wife and I bought it in October of 2002, and Doc passed in January of 2005. But about 2003 on, I wasn't I wasn't sticking with any of the projects, any of the feather pulling, because I was busy. I owned a small business, and I wasn't writing him anymore. And I would get a letter from him. Hey kid, I'm checking up on you. How you doing? I guess you just really. So I've got letters in there that he sent me that, you know, unrequited. I didn't. I was just busy, and he was just like, "Hey, I'm still here. You still want to do this stuff?" And I feel bad about that, but I love the guy. Anyway, I'm
Well,
almond crazy. Love almonds. Always will. Anybody wants to know about them, look me up.
yeah.
I'm on Facebook, Kenny Pomona feed. Like I said, if you want me to post some of those beautiful pictures, I will post them. Like I told you, this 30-minute podcast could go an hour, could go longer if you wanted to, but whatever. If they want more,
Well,
we'll do more. At some
we'll
point, I need to talk about my love for the old pigeon books.
yeah. Well, we'll call this one part one because I think we're over the clock a little bit right now. But Kenny, thanks. This has been really good, really educational stuff here, and it's really
Yeah,
cool to be able to hear a
it
little bit
might
about
just
Doc
it might
also.
just be it might just be fluff filler. I don't know. We'll see.
It works. Thanks for coming on. This has been a lot of fun.
Okay, and I got one thing I say in every video before you turn me off.
Yeah,
Peace.
I like it. And that's another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Thanks for joining us today and for being a part of this incredible pigeon community. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a fellow pigeon fancier. Leave a comment, follow wherever you're listening. Every share helps introduce more people to the hobby that we all love. You can find our one-of-a-kind merchandise, support our nonprofit mission with a donation, and explore all the different resources we have available for you at pigeonpod.com. That's pigeonpod.com. Do you have a topic that you'd like us to cover? Do you have a guest that you want to have on the show? Maybe you yourself would like to come on and just talk pigeons with us. Go ahead and send us an email at staff@pigeonpod.com. Remember, every episode of the All About Pigeons podcast is listener requested and completely ad-free thanks to the support of this community. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Phillip Fry, and remember, together, the hobby thrives, support each other, and enjoy your pigeons.